Ladies and gents, welcome to a Shroom Live podcast. Tonight I'm with Rhys Fagundez, who's going to be talking about offshore tactics for tuna and marlin. He's an active angler. He has dabbled in all sorts of fishing, from your freshwater bass fishing, to inshore salt for jewies, and now he's been bitten by the offshore fishing bug. And that's where you're going to find him, because that's what he's been focusing on in the recent memory. So in addition to being an angler, he's also a father. He keeps busy being a boxer as well, but he has found time to come on the podcast and share his knowledge about this pursuit. So without further ado, let's welcome Rhys to Shroom Live.
Thanks for the introduction, Shroom. You're way too kind.
Yeah, well, like I said, there's not much I need to do besides introduce the guest and sort of, feed off your energy. And hopefully the listeners at home enjoy this one because, I think we've got a lot to talk about. This is the first time I've got a guest who's going to be talking about this type of fishing. And, for me, I've barely done any of this sort of fishing. Maybe once or twice I've headed offshore. So it's a whole new world out there, and the rules and the way that people conduct themselves and, target fish is possibly very different to, what I'll do down on the local mud banks of the Georges River. Let's start off by talking about your fishing journey and how you started off getting into the sport and then obviously into offshore fishing.
Basically, I got started, my dad, when I was a little kid, took me off some piers. I'm fairly sure the first fish I caught was a little puffer fish. And I didn't care that it was a puffer fish. I didn't care that it was everybody else's bycatch. I was over the moon just to catch a fish. And then from there, things just kind of spiraled out of control really quickly. Got into bass fishing. As you said, some dewy fishing. Took 2 years to break the curse to actually get my first one. Some stuff on kings, brim, flathead, a little bit of trout fishing. And then from the day that I caught my first marlin, it was kind of game over, and I decided game fishing was what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's pretty much going from small fish to medium-sized fish and then to the big MacDaddy fish offshore. That's I think that's how my brain worked when I was young. I was catching, I think, eels and catfish in the Georges River along those banks. And like you said, I just didn't care what I was catching at that age. It was just all fun and games. And I thought every time I was fishing, I was hoping for a big one, like a shark, for example. And it just kept me entertained. And here we are on the Shroom Live talking about fishing because we're just a couple of big time addicts basically to summarize how we sort of see the whole sport of fishing. Now, let's talk a little bit about bass fishing because that's quite interesting. Usually people that get into bass fishing, they're starting to head off into more freshwater species such as cod, but you've gone the other way.
Yeah, look, a few of my mates had boats and they were out in the harbour chasing kings, and all I heard over and over again was, you got to catch a kingy, you've got to catch a kingy. So I wanted to get out there and see what all the fuss was about. I think they definitely lived up to the hype. But then, yeah, from there it was just, okay, now I want bigger. And, yeah, before I knew it, I was on the end of a line to a marlin or a bluefin tuna or a yellowfin tuna. And that's pretty much all I've been doing recently. It's just been offshore chasing the bigger fish.
Now, how did you get into this sort of fishing? Was it somebody close to you that introduced you into this, or one day you just decided that, no, this is what I want to do and I'm, going to purchase my own boat and figure it out?
No, so it was a mate of mine's dad. He was quite big in the game fishing scene. I think he's been fishing 30, 40 years. He's won a couple of comps. We'd all grown up seeing his photos of all the stuff he caught. And then one day out of the blue, he gave us a ring and he said, there's a spot on a mate of mine's boat. Do you guys want to go out? And I'd been chasing marlin at that point for a couple of months, very unsuccessfully. I'll add, I was doing pretty much everything wrong that you can do wrong.
Yeah.
And we went out with a couple of professionals. And then that day they put us onto, so there's a group of us. We went we raised 7 fish, we hooked 7 fish, we landed 7 fish. So it was pretty much the dream day out. And then,
Wow.
from there, the addiction just got so much worse.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really fully understand the world of offshore fishing, but even if you get 1 fish, it's an achievement, let alone 7. That would have been mania on that boat that day.
Yeah, it was crazy. And the first one I'd hooked, I'll be honest, I actually didn't enjoy the fight because I'd been trying so hard. I put in a lot of time, a lot of money trying to land one. And then when it hooked up and I seen it jump out of the water, it was just, please don't spit the hooks. That was all that was going through my head. And it wasn't a massive marlin by any stretch. It was probably a 40 to 50 kilo juvenile black out of Port Stephens. But then once we got it to the boat, we got a couple of photos, got the tags in it, let it go. And then a couple of hours later, I got a chance at another one. So I actually got to reel in 2 for that day. And yeah, man, there's just something different, like seeing them. They honestly, the little blacks, they spend more time out of the water than they do in the water. And there's something about that. It's just addicting.
So they're just a completely aerial sort of display fish, basically. They're always jumping much every time you're hooking up.
Yeah, they go off. Like, they'll come up, they'll break the surface, they'll be in the water for a second or two, then they're back out on top. It's different. I mean, being on the end of any fish is good fun, but for me personally, one of those, there's nothing like it.
I was just thinking about my experiences with Australian salmon or maybe even barra up north. When they jump, you could lose it. It's just a higher chance of them spitting hooks. Is that one of your concerns when these fish come up and breach?
Yeah, 100%, man. Like that was on the end of the first one. It was just every time I seen it out of the water, please don't spit the hook. And like there's a lot of things that go into it. Like when you're the one on the end of the rod, you've got to be keeping tension constantly. And these are fish that can swim at 110 kilometers an hour. So that's easier said than done, especially when you're nervous. It's your first time using a game reel. Like for anyone that's ever gone from using spinning gear to overhead game reels, it's very, very different. And I'd never even held a game reel, so I had no idea what I was doing, but we had a real good skipper, a really good crew, and they managed to get me onto the fish.
Yeah, actually, you just invoke some thoughts into me about, how different these game fishing reels and rods are. Like I remember holding on to, I think it was a Tiagra or a Talica or something, and they're just, how do you describe it? It's just so chunky. So everything's just so heavy and it's taxing on the body.
I can go you one better than describing it. I've got one next to me. I'll pull it up.
Yeah, let's do that.
So there's a Tiagra 30 wide, which is one of the smaller Tiagras, believe it or not. I think one of the biggest challenges people have, or at least I had, is when you're using an egg beater, the line's self-leveling, so you don't have to worry about the line bunching up and all winding up on one place. As using one of those, you've got to level the line on as you're bringing it back on. Yeah,
you've got to use your thumb and fingers and sort of adjust it.
Yeah. I mean, if you just reel, all your line's going to bunch up on one spot, and then you won't actually be able to reel anymore. I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't know before they start.
I think also bent butts also. I find it's supposed to help you fight the fish better, I suppose, but I found it really awkward. Just sort of fighting a fish.
Bent butts for tuna are great. I personally probably wouldn't. I wouldn't use them for marlin. Mainly because marlin are up in the air more often than not, or they're at least fighting on the surface. Tuna are quite dirty, so they'll just dive for the bottom as quickly and as hard as they can. And with the bent butt, if you're locked into a gimbal, you don't have to hold the rod. The rod's clipped in, and then the angle of it's a lot easier just to get that slight pull up. Yeah. So I mean, it's different butts for different fish.
Yeah, makes sense. I was going to add a joke there, but yeah, we'll leave it PG.
Don't want to get banned off YouTube.
That's right. Hey guys, you can enjoy the joke. I know you guys understood that one. But anyway, before we get, fully stuck into this offshore discussion, tactics and all that and such, what about other things that you might, that you have plans on chasing? Because I'm sure you've done, like you said, you've done all sorts of fishing so far. There's got to be some species or types of fishing that still interest you that you want to get into. Is there a species out there that you'd like to nominate?
I haven't caught a mako shark yet. To be fair, I haven't actually targeted them, but they're definitely on the bucket list. And a sailfish.
So about mako sharks, I've seen, obviously everyone's seen them, all these little videos, and they're going ballistic, flying through the air and flying onto the back of game boats and stuff. Is that what excites you?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't even really, I can't beat around the bush with it. It's more just, them being in the air, and they're such an impressive animal. Like, they're fast, they're strong. I mean, aside from a great white, they're more or less king of the sea, really. At least for anything we're going to get off Sydney. Yeah.
Apparently they're good eating as well.
I've heard that. On, I think it's Wicked Tuna, one of the tuna fishing shows, whenever they get makos as bycatch, they'll actually keep them. As most other sharks, they'll throw them back. So, yeah, I'm assuming they must be okay to eat.
Yeah. And a sailfish. Not swordfish, sailfish?
Look, I would like a sword, but something about deep dropping, it doesn't get my blood pumping as much. That's just a personal thing more than anything. Sailfish, I guess they're the fastest, or it's argued between a sailfish or a black marlin, but arguably the fastest fish in the sea. And I think there's another one. Like, I made a bucket list when I was probably 11 years old, and that's one I haven't ticked off there just yet. So I'd love to get one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Every time I see captures or videos of, those swordfish, they're down deep and they've got these big buggy eyes, and, they just, I don't know, they look a bit weird. They look a bit like a deformed, I mean, they're all obviously, what do you call it? The class of billfish. All these are billfish. Sailfish, I'm assuming, every time I picture a sailfish, I'm thinking shallow seas, tropical, and they're just carving it up. They're really quick and they're agile.
Well, that's what gets my attention with them. It's, it's not just the fish itself, it's how you catch them, where you are, crystal blue waters near some tropical island somewhere. It doesn't get any better than that. Yeah, there is that famous place, Rompin Sailfish. I'm sure you've heard of that. Yeah, I've seen a few videos, and some of the fish they pull out of there, oh my God. What about maybe not so offshore, but maybe something inshore, or maybe even in the rivers and creeks? Is there anything that interests you there? Because like you said, you've done some bass fishing, so you've tasted sweet water. Yeah, I'd love to land a Murray cod. I haven't actually fished for them, which would probably be surprising, like after doing years and years and years of bass fishing. But I've just never targeted them. I'd definitely love to give them a crack. But like right now we're in the middle of tuna season, so I'm not going to stop tuna fishing to go inland and chase cod just at the moment. Maybe when tuna season ends. Yeah. Look, I'll just quickly add before we get back to tuna, but I have been trying to chase cod, and it seems like a whole new world with throwing the craziest looking lures, and I don't know, it's just different. It's just a completely different sort of thing. I chase fish in the salt, and it's all about matching the hatch and getting lures which look natural, and then I'm chasing cod and I'm throwing like bird lures, rat lures, lizards. I mean, sure, these are matching the hatch to some extent, but to some other extent it looks like a complete novel approach. Of course you got your spinner baits and plenty of other options that you've got too, but yeah, I think that's one part of I'm sure there's a lot of Murray cod lovers out there. Just to touch on that before we move straight back into the offshore. Even then, some of those spinner baits, like, I'm completely with you. I'm all for matching the hatch. Like, what is in those river systems that looks like a spinner bait?
That's yeah, it's true. I mean, a lot of the lures, they're either big surface presentations of some. I mean, you can even get like Pokemon lures and stuff. It's just weird things, and that's one part of cod fishing that I like. Like, I don't know what the fight's gonna be like. I mean, I do know. I've seen enough videos, and you've researched your quarry before you go fishing, but it's that aspect that doesn't seem to come up in other types of fishing. Just the variety of presentations and lures that you can throw. Now, let's move on back into tuna and like offshore tactics for tuna and marlin. And you mentioned something about, I think it was, now I can't recall, but I think it was like on your approach that you need to take when it comes to offshore fishing, that a lot of people, especially when they're starting off, they don't consider, but they want to get into it. What are some things that you can think of that relate to this?
Biggest thing that I think I personally had trouble with, and I know a few other people have trouble with, is knowing how to find the good water, knowing what to look for. Because with any sort of that fishing, you're fishing open ocean, you're not fishing structure. You're trying to find a needle in a haystack, really. So you want to go out there knowing what sort of water they like, what sort of currents they like. You want to be looking for birds. You want to be looking for bait. I mean, when I first went out there, I was looking for birds and bait, but the thing is, I was in the wrong water altogether. So there were going to be no birds there. There were going to be no bait balls there. There was going to be no fish there. Even little things like the lures that I had out were all wrong for black marlin, which was what I was trying to get at the time. Yep. But yeah, a lot of it's learning how to read your charts and just learning what to look for. Like, there'll be days where the weather might look amazing. There's no swell, there's no wind, and I want to go fishing, but I'll look at the charts and look at the water temps, and there's no point. You know the fish aren't there before you even go out. And then there's other days where I might be meant to work, but I'll look and the sea just looks amazing. The temps are perfect, the currents are right, and I may have to call in sick for work and get out there fishing.
Yeah, I think we all understand that. It's that it's that meme. They always put this on social media, on Facebook, for example. You see a picture of the weekend, and it's like, I don't know, high seas out there and, tornadoes and, thunderstorms. And then on the weekday, it's completely flat. It's picture perfect. And sometimes you just have to, I mean, if you're heading offshore, I think picking conditions is important for safety as well. And sometimes you just can't head out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if you're going out, especially in a trailer boat in 3.5, 4 meter swell with 40, 50 knot winds, you're asking for trouble. So that's one of the biggest things too. Anyone first starting out, make sure you check the weather 3 or 4 times before you go. And if it looks sketchy, just come back in.
Yeah. What are some like metrics when it comes to weather that someone that's starting off should look for? Like maybe like some sort of a number for swell or wind or any other considerations, just a ballpark number. Of course, take with a grain of salt, do your research before you head off.
I mean, obviously depends on the size of the boat. If you're in a 40-foot, 50-foot game boat, you can go out in bigger stuff. With me, I'm in a 6.7 meter bar crusher, so I can probably head out in stuff that's a little bit bigger than what most people would. But personally, anything over, say, 2.5 meters of swell, and you want to be looking at the intervals too. So you can have 2 meter swell, but if that's at 20-second intervals, they're really slow, nice rolling waves. They'll almost rock you to sleep. But you can have 1.5 meter swell at 4 or 5 second intervals, and you're just going to get smashed all day. So one big thing is not just look at the swell number, look at the intervals. That's the frequency of the waves coming at you, and then you'll have a rough sort of idea of what kind of a day you're going to be in for. But the biggest thing is, if you don't feel comfortable, turn around and go back in. There's always going to be another day to go fishing.
Yeah, excellent point. And what
also
about in terms of... Yep, carry on.
Oh, sorry. I just remembered one rule of thumb, a general rule of thumb I got told by an older bloke years ago, was if the wind in knots is more than double the length of your boat, you probably won't make it home. So, for example, my boat's 22 foot. If I was to go out in wind that was worse than 44 knots, which is 88 kilometers, give or take, I'd be in some big, big trouble.
Yeah, 88 kilometers. It sounds like ain't nobody getting home in the 88 kilometers. I think on bomb, that's considered like sub-hurricane or full gale or something ridiculous.
Yeah, it's definitely at least gale.
Yeah. What about, like I said, the conditions? We talked about the safety. What about in terms of fish finding and fish catching?
I mean, it differs for everything, obviously, slightly, but general rule of thumb, you want to look for some nice currents. You want to be looking for temperature breaks. That's a big one. So say if you're on your charts and you're looking and you see an area where it breaks from 21.5 degrees down to 20 or even 19.5 sometimes, there's those really big breaks. Generally speaking, there will be fish hanging around there. But also do your research too. Like you want to learn what fish tends to get caught in what temperature. Like every fish, there's a reason why we catch all our tuna in winter and our marlin in summer. Marlin obviously prefer that warmer water. Tuna like it a bit colder. And then you've got the difference with yellowfin and bluefin. Bluefin will always be in slightly colder water than yellowfin, or more often than not.
Do you know ballpark numbers at all, or is it just it sort of depends?
Yellowfin anywhere, and again, this is from what I've been told. So I've heard your best numbers are between 19 and 21 degrees. However, every yellowfin I've caught has been between 19 to 19.8, and it's almost every time been near a temperature break somewhere, and in an area where there's slower moving currents. So you've got to think of it. The fish are always going to be chasing the bait. If you can find the bait, you'll more than likely find the fish. When I keep talking about currents, if you've got currents that are moving at 7 to 8 kilometers an hour, those tiny little bait fish, they can't swim in that. So the bait fish are always looking for a little bit of refuge. Kind of like if you're trying to catch liveys, your yakkers that you'll be looking for in the harbour, they're normally around structure. They're looking for somewhere to hide. It's the same principle offshore. They're looking for the slower moving water because they can actually swim in that. So if you find spots where, say you've got currents of between 0.5 kilometre to 2 kilometres per hour, and there's a temp break lining up near that area, there's more than likely going to be fish hanging around there.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It totally makes sense. On land, you've got, your jetties, your wharves, you've got rocks submerged, and the bait definitely hangs around those areas. Offshore, of course, we're talking about, I don't know how many meters, hundreds of meters, maybe even kilometers if you go out far enough, if you keep heading out east. So I guess it's just more water and more water, but you've got all these temperature breaks and thermoclines and different depths, and things are going on. There's currents, upwellings, and all sorts of things. And that's the sort of thing that I guess one that wants to start fishing offshore needs to understand and come to terms with. It's not easy, but there are things there that one could apply and learn to improve their success, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Even little things, and this will sound really stupid, but the people that have done it before will know what I'm talking about. Like, if you're in greener water, if you're looking at your sounder, there tends to be no fish there. As soon as that water gets a bit bluer, that real dark, deep blue colour, 99 out of 100 times when you hook up, it will be in that nice blue water where you see the birds hanging around. It's in that nice blue water. If you're finding bait, you know what I mean? Little things like that, just finding the nicer water, that's a good place to start. And then you start looking for your temp breaks, your currents, all the rest of it. And then it's just a waiting game.
About finding bait. So obviously one way to find bait would be to preempt and predict where they would be according to where the currents are. Like you said, you're looking for it in the slower moving, say 1 to 2 kilometer movements of current rather than 6 or 7 when they're literally getting pushed along. But birds, that's obviously, you mentioned birds already. That's one way to sort of look for them. Maybe you can sometimes see them bubbling up on the surface. What sort of bait and what sort of other signs could you look for out there? Say you go to an area, you looked at the charts and you're heading out there. What are you looking for?
I mainly look for birds. However, in saying that, there's a fair few species of birds. The best ones, if you can find them, are gannets. So they're larger birds, they're white, they've got kind of a brown head.
Yep.
They're usually a good indicator that there's fish nearby.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, you don't have to be some sort of a bird specialist or a ornithologist. I think that's what they call them. So, but gannets is one species. There's a fair few of other species I've seen out there too. Their names escape me. They're not as indicative of bait, or it's just they're good, but they're not as good.
I mean, seagulls, they don't really mean a lot from what I've seen and experienced, at least. Albatross aren't always bad, but the thing is, they cover that much ground. You don't know whether they're following the fish. I don't know whether it's an old fisher's wives' tale or what it is, but yeah, everyone's always said gannets, 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 and from my experience, gannets have been good too. We were out, I think it was 3-4 weeks ago, and in all honesty, we weren't being discriminative over either yellowfin or bluefin. We just wanted to get onto tuna. Anyway, I wasn't driving. One of the boys was driving, and he spotted one bird, and it was just hovering above the surface. And I think he's seen a little bit of surface action, but he didn't call it because he didn't want us to all get so excited. And when you're out there, your eyes will play tricks on you. Sometimes you'll think you've seen fish, and there's no fish there. But anyway, he's drove over to the patch. 1 rod goes off, 2 rods go off, 3 rods go off. The boys are trying to clear the spread. We had a 5-rod spread out, and then the other 2 rods have hooked up in their hand. We ended up hooking 5 bluefin at once.
Wow, that's a crazy turn of events there. I think that just gets everyone frothing just thinking about that. Just next rod, all 5 going off.
That was chaos. We ended up landing 4 of them. I don't know how they didn't tangle across each other or anything like that. Yeah, we got 4 of them in, but that was from something as silly as just 1 bird hovering over the water. So like with the birds too, if you just see a bird flying around kind of aimlessly, it probably doesn't mean that much. But if a bird's hovering over an area, or even better, it's diving into the water, diving straight down, there's fish there.
Yeah, I think there's nothing that gets the blood pumping seeing birds diving at Mach 5, like they just look like they're just like smashing the water, and they're probably getting really far down, and it could be on for young and old, like in mere seconds.
Well, what they say about game fishing in general, it's hours of boredom for minutes of chaos. And it really is. You'll be driving for hours and see nothing until you do see something, and then before you know it, it's crazy.
Yeah, I was also going to say, like, in addition to birds, have you ever seen a bee out that far? Because I have.
Can't say that I have, man.
It's the weirdest thing. It's happened almost every time I've been offshore, and I'm talking about, like, Browns Mountain and further, and there's just a stray bee flying in around your head, and it just boggles the mind how, A, it even got out there, and why it's still flying around your head, and you know that if it flew off, it's dead, so you don't want to shoo it off the boat. I don't know, I just had this random thought because it's happened a few times to me. Talking about flying things such as birds, there's also bees out there for those that are, have a phobia of that.
It makes you think too, how is the bee going to find his way home?
That's right, that's what I was saying. Like, I didn't want to shoo it off the boat because that's a death sentence. At least staying in and around the boat, it could possibly get back to land and live. Probably not, but possibly. Now, let's keep moving and let's talk about maybe, I think we should talk about lures and lure spreads and all that. That seems to be a pretty hot topic when it comes to offshore fishing. And I'm sure you've got a lot of thoughts on that.
Yeah. That plays probably your second biggest part in it. Obviously, first is finding the fish, and second is making sure you've got the right things out there to entice the bite. I think with lure selection, it is similar to most other types of saltwater fishing, the match the hatch kind of thing. So if you've got big schools of souries that have come across the coast, you want to try and match those. If they're feeding on slimy mackerel, if you can get lures with colorations around the same size as those. But then there's other things too, and this is where it gets a little bit more complex. Like for your corners, which are your lures that sit closer in, you want them to be a darker sort of a colour because you've got your prop wash. Your prop wash is a light colour, so you want a darker colour standing out amongst that prop wash, if that makes sense.
That's good. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and then out in your riggers. So if your boat's got outriggers, you want your lures that are a little bit brighter because they'll stand out amongst the darker water. And then out in your shotgun, I mean, you can pretty much run whatever you want. I've been running Pro Fidgis. They're like a really big soft plastic with a weight. I've got a couple here.
Yeah, they're just nothing at all. No one's interested in those lures from what I hear. Folks, for you guys that don't understand that joke, like Pro Fidgis, and there's obviously a few lures that have been made in the past that people just scramble to buy every time they hit the classifieds. It's just one of those that has like a cult following, would you say, Rhys?
Yeah, but it's not a cult following for no reason. I mean, I got put onto them by a mate of mine, and at first I was a little bit skeptical, but then we've caught every time we've had a Pro Fidgi in shotgun, that shotgun has gone off.
Wow. So it's obviously, it's just one of those lures that is considered a must-have.
Yeah, they definitely work. Especially, I think this year there's been a good run of souries come through, and I mean you're matching the hatch perfectly. They're around about the same size. They swim really erratically. They're great colours. They look natural. I mean, if I was a fish, I would be eating them.
Let's have a look at some lures now. I think you've got some prepared, so we'll have a look at that. That would, make it a lot more interesting on a video podcast. That's one thing. We've got a couple of eyes, and I know lures don't come cheap any way you slice it, but especially offshore lures are expensive.
Yeah, they definitely hurt the bank, and you can't tell your missus what they really cost because she'll never let you go fishing ever again. So this is one of those Pro Fidgis we were just talking about.
Yeah, so you can see there that you've rigged it in big soft plastic.
Yeah,
catches the fish, does the business.
Yeah, definitely gets that done. And then in my corners, I like to run just a couple of little Halcos. I mean, they're not that little. I think they're 190 mil, but just 2 meter divers. Yeah. Little Laser Pros. They're quite cheap as far as lures go. I mean, you can get your more expensive brands, your Nomads, X-Wraps, all the rest of it. But, like in my personal experience, I've found the Halcos actually swim the nicest when you're trolling at a high speed. And they're only, I think they're like $22 or something. So if you lose one, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, that's not too bad. They hold up well. They don't break or anything. I'm sure chasing fish offshore, you break a few lures.
Look, they're not too bad. The only thing with them is they come with treble hooks. We always change them over straight away to larger assist hooks. Your hookup rate's better and they're a lot stronger. Like those smaller trebles on a 70, 80 kilo fish, they'll straighten those really easily.
Yeah, it makes sense. Do you get rid of the barbs off your lures at all, or you leave them on?
No, leave the barbs on. Sharpen them, and I know some guys do file them down a little bit. I don't, but I think that's down to a personal preference sort of thing.
Yep.
And then the other lures you've got are your skirts.
Squid skirt.
Open. So there's I think that's what, a 9-10 inch, and that's just a Pakula. That's a bubble head. That one's just single rigged with a shackle rig on it.
Do you have preferences for colour for skirts? Or is it more like what you said before, like say if you're running out the back you want a bright colour, or if you're enclosed you want a dark colour? I mean, and those ones you'd run it out far.
Yeah, so ones like that pink one I pulled out, I'd run them in the outriggers. It depends what you're fishing for. Not that exact lure. It was a black peat version of that. Caught a really nice yellowfin last time we went out 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But that seems to be working well. Like from what I've done so far, having those brighter colours out that little bit wider, I think it must just stand out amongst the blue water. I need to think about it from the fisher's point of view too. Like they're out in the middle of the desert essentially. They hear a boat, they're going to swim up to have a look at what it is, and then they see these things swimming along behind it. If you can get their attention, they're probably going to come and grab it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It is a sort of desert out there, isn't it? It's just empty water, not empty water, but it's hundreds of meters of water. If you're in the wrong spot, it is a desert. If you're in the right spot, it's all alive. It's all popping all around you. Things are happening.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you get the odd little bits of structure here and there. Like Sydney's not too bad. Sydney actually has some decent structure off it. Like you've got the Southern Canyons, you've got Browns Mountain. Out further again, you've got Heaton's Hill. If you go a little bit further north, like directly off Swansea, you've got the Nora Canyons. But, I mean, these things are all, like you were saying, you've been out to Browns before. Browns is... What's Browns? 45 kilometres out. And
it's about 40 odd.
And then you double that and you're at Heaton's Hill. So you've got 40 kilometres of just nothing in between each other.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, with the fish hear the boats, they come up, especially Marlin. Marlin are quite curious. They will actually come up to your boat just to have a look at what it is and then swim back down. And that's where teasers and stuff will help, just to really grab their attention and get them in the spread and make either if you're fishing with liveys, make your liveys stand out, or make your lures stand out.
Yeah, so let's just run through the procedure. Like, say you're getting out there for the day, you found your spot. We haven't talked about like some of the things in like what you picked, or troll speeds and all that. But let's just say that you're out there and you've got your spread. Like, how would you go about it? For Marlin versus Tuna, just like real briefly.
Marlin, I haven't chased blues just yet. I've spent all my time chasing blacks, and I've caught a couple of stripes as bycatch. I mean, I know it sounds funny catching a Marlin as bycatch, but it's not your target species.
Yeah.
So with those little blacks, they're really, really fun. So we actually live bait them. So we'll go out.
Yep.
First thing we'll do is look for slimy mackerel, get a couple of liveys on board, and then when you're running live bait for game fish, it's different to with lures. So lures, I'll run up to a 5 lures spread. With those liveys, you only ever want to run 2 at a time. And then it's just looking for nice water. If you can find some structure, great, but mainly you want to find nice water with bait and use your sounder. Your sounder's your best friend. If you find big chunks of bait ball almost taking up your whole screen and you see a line going straight through it, there is a marlin attacking that bait. So that's when you want to throw your liveys out, get them off your riggers so they're out of your prop wash slightly.
Yeah.
And then just drive laps around that bait ball, and sooner or later the marlin will probably come up and have a crack at them. Because it's like you've got all this bait squeezing in tight, moving together as one. And then if you're the fish, you see this one stray, poor little mackerel off to the side, you're going to go and grab him. He's the easiest target.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. What about for tuna?
Tuna, I'd go out so first things first, I'd spend the night before researching the charts, checking the water temps, where the nice water's at, all the rest of it. Then get to the boat ramp, and I usually download the chart to my phone, because when you get out that far, just for anyone that doesn't know, you have no reception. It's not like you're dropping in and out. There's just nothing. So I download the charts to my phone just to remember kind of where I'm going. I'll punch in the coordinates on the sounder, get out there as quick and as safely as you can. And then tuna, you just more or less start trolling that line. Have your line predetermined based on where the nice water is. In order of the spread, you always put your furthest lure from the boat out first. So I let my shotgun go, long rigger, short rigger, long corner, short corner. And then it's just a waiting game. You're moving along depending on how your lures are swimming. So again, general speeds, people say, is between your 6 to 8 knots, but you always want to be checking how your lures are swimming. If your lures are popping out of the water, then you're probably going a little bit too quick and you might need to slow it down.
Yeah, I'd say from my experiences being out there, you're watching the rod tip, see if it changes. Sometimes you pick up a bit of weed or it's blown itself out of the water and you just haven't realized. So you definitely have to check. Otherwise, you're going to be trolling for hours on end and realize that you had no chance at catching a fish because the lure was fouled by something or, wrapped around itself. It's the worst feeling.
Yeah, that's it. If your lures aren't swimming right, you're not catching fish, and you may as well just go and empty your wallet straight into the ocean.
Yeah, isn't that what we're already doing? Fishing? No, guys, no, ladies and gents, no, that's not what we're doing. We are getting something out of our sport here. Not needlessly, aimlessly emptying out our wallets. But sometimes it almost is like that, especially boat fishing.
Oh man, the days you're out 12, 13, 14, 15 hours and you come home with a donut, it definitely feels like it.
Yeah. That's right, Rhys. Is there anything else that we've glossed over or that you'd like to go into relating to picking spots for a day or, trolling speeds or anything like that? Because my next question was on, gears and rigs and learning, knots and all that, because I'm sure that's completely different to what, the vast majority of anglers would be using when you head off that way.
Yeah, it is. It's completely different. There's more crimping than there is actual tying knots. You've got to learn new knots. You've got to learn how to tie your double, whether you're doing an Aussie Plat or a Bimini twist, which, to be honest, it takes ages. I've only just started to get the hang of it recently. What's another one? You got to learn a cat's paw. The cat's paw, that's an easy one. The Plat takes a little bit of time to get better at it, but it's one of those things. It's like when you first learn to tie a uni or a double uni or an FG. Nobody gets it first go. You just sit there and practice till you get it.
Yeah. I think, I've learned some of these knots in the past, but it's, it's unnecessary if you're fishing inshore, learning how to do a bimini with an Albright, like that sort of style. I was fishing that just a bit, just to see how it would go, because it looked like a cool knot, and I thought, you know what, let's learn this knot and fish it. But there's no mucking around once you're offshore, because you have to believe in your gear and your knots. That's why I think it's definitely something that you got to pay careful attention to. I want to ask you about gear and all that. People are using, everything offshore is really expensive. You're talking about Tiagras, Talicas, and I'm sure there's other bits of reel or rods in there that I'm not thinking about. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, most of my gear are Tiagras. I like running the Tiagra Ultra rods. All my reels are Tiagra 30 wides. I do want to add a couple of 50s in when I can. But in all honesty, there's some really great reels that aren't going to cost you $1,000 to $1,500 a pop. The Shimano Tiernos, which is kind of like what, say, your Saragossa is to your Stella. Like they call the Saragossa the poor man's Stella. Tiernos is similar to that. It does pretty much everything a Tiagra does. I've got one myself. It's been bulletproof. I really could not complain with it, man. So, I mean, you don't have to go and spend $2,500 on a combo. You can get away with it. I mean, it's still a lot of money, but for, say, $600-$700, you can get yourself something decent that will handle a good-sized fish.
Yeah, I've definitely used the Tianos. They're solid as, like you said, it's probably like Saragossa to Stella as Tianos is to Tiagra. And then you've got Talica somewhere in the mix too. I don't know where that stands. Where is it? Is that the highest model, or the Tiagra's the highest model? What's been your perspective? It
depends who you ask. Price point, they're fairly similar. I think that the Talicas have a slightly deeper spool. The Tiagra's drag system, from what I know, is slightly better. But for me, what led me towards Tiagra's, and you'll probably laugh at me for saying this, is just the sound of when the drag's peeling. Like the sound of the Tiagra.
You're saying that as though it doesn't matter. It matters completely.
Yeah, man. When they're pulling line, there's nothing that sounds quite like them. And honestly, they've been around. I think they started making the Tiagras nearly 30 years ago. And like, if you ever watch Marketplace to try and get some cheap secondhand gear, I've seen Tiagras from the 90s being sold. And then, I mean, I don't know if they're still in fully working order, but that's what the guy in the ad says. So we'll take his word for it. I mean, they're one of those things. If you look after them and you treat them well, you're never going to have an issue.
Yeah, I was just thinking these fish, obviously, they go from size 0 to size 999, so you could break a reel or rod on one of these fish. But yeah, these reels are solid. They definitely feel solid. They're about a couple of kilos, I think. Just holding in your hand, you can feel how hefty they are.
Yeah, I think the 30 wides are about 3.5 kilo, I think, off the top of my head.
Wow, I'm a bit off there. I thought it was only a couple, but yeah, 3.5. You're getting a big workout.
I think fully spooled, that's what they end up. But that's why it pays to be fishing with a gimbal too. Like, I've done it without a gimbal and it's not fun.
No, is that even... I guess it is possible. But, I mean, you wouldn't want to do it. It's just one of those things. Oh, yeah, that's why. The Talica, I think, has an advantage over weight. I think it's better for standing up and fighting a fish.
I think you're right,
I think Tiagra's a bit more... It's a bit more of that artillery-based gear, you know, like it's lock and load, like trebuchet sort of style, you know?
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. I didn't even think of that, but yeah, I'm fairly sure the Talicas are a little bit lighter. Penn also have their international range, which I've never used one, but I've only ever heard good things. Apparently they're really, really good reels as well.
Yeah, those internationals, are they the Penn ones? I think I've seen a few of them in videos.
Yeah, they're the Penn ones. From what I've seen, a lot of the American guys actually run them. A lot of the big Marlin comps over there.
Yeah, I was about to say that. That's where I've seen them.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've only ever heard good things. I haven't used them, but I can't imagine that they're a bad reel at all.
Yeah. What about, like, in terms of lines?
I run all mono, only for the stretch that you get, and just the little bit extra abrasion resistance. I mean, any of my egg beaters, they're all braid, but just on my game reels, I run only mono. You can run a braid backing. You will get more line on your reel. But I think my rods, I've got about 500-600 meters of line on there anyway. The way I see it is if a fish can pull 500-600 meters on me, I'm probably not going to stop it by having an extra 100 or 200 meters on.
That's right, yeah. If it can reach New Zealand, hey, it's earned its freedom.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, if you've got that drag preset to 7 or 8 kilos and they've pulled 600 meters on that, they've earned their freedom. They can go. Yeah,
the reason I asked about line is because I seemingly, my understanding is everyone pretty much uses the same sort of stuff, which is same sort of mono. It's just whether they want to put braid backing. Is that true, or was there more to that story?
Yes. No, so everyone will use mono as a top shot. It's just whether they've got braid underneath it or not. I mean, everyone's got a different preference. Like the guys that I fish with, they all use braid backing. I can't really give you a reason. It's just more, I just, in my head, I've got the abrasion resistance factor in there. And I just think that maybe the mono might make that extra difference. But the way I see it is if you're getting spooled, you're getting spooled. There's not a lot you can do to stop it unless you start chasing the fish very, very quickly.
Have you ever hooked anything weird out there or unusual, unlikely?
Yeah, bonito.
The question. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I've hooked a bonito on I think it was a little 6-inch Pakula skirt. I hooked a bonnie and had no idea what it was. Like the reel started peeling off a little bit because I had the drag was set very light. Snapped out of the rigger, started pulling it in. In my head, I'm like, what is this? And then, bonito, surely enough. And I think we would have been 60, 70 kilometres offshore. Like a bonito had no business being out there. Yeah,
just a big bait, I guess. Everything out there eats it. And they're normally in big schools, aren't they?
Yeah, usually. I mean, he was just probably out there as a blue marlin's lunch.
The reason I ask that is because once every so often you see videos of people. Now, I don't know if they're offshore trolling or whatever they're doing, but they catch or they come across these massive sunfish. You know, those really large yellow red disc fish.
So I do have a story about a sunfish.
That, or you've hooked one or you've seen one. You know, that would be magical.
I've got a good story about a sunfish. So we were snapper fishing down the south coast maybe a month or so ago. And when I go out, my business partner, he's got a bigger boat as well. And we generally go out together. Anyway, they were at one reef, we were at another reef. And what we'll do, we talk over the radios, whichever spot's fishing better, we'll both migrate there. We help each other. And he jumped on the radio to me and there's a sunfish here. I'm like, I'll get a video of it. I didn't realise it was about 3 or 4 metres under the water. So what he's done, one of my other mates was on the boat. He's only quite little though. So he's grabbed him by the ankles, dipped him in the water with the GoPro so he could start filming the sunfish. And they got it all on camera. But the drama was the guy who was in the water couldn't say that he needed to come up to breathe. Yeah. So he started thrashing around. Eventually they pulled him out of the water. He's gone because he couldn't get the air. And he's but
how big was it?
I haven't seen it. I'm not sure. It would have been at least 2.5 meters. It was big. But I haven't seen anything that strange out there. I think the whale migration that was on not long ago, there were heaps of whales going up and down the coast. But that's not strange. It's just beautiful to see. I mean, you always see dolphins out there. Occasionally you'll see a seal a long, long way from shore. And I always wonder, like, what are you doing out here? Aren't you tired?
They're doing one thing you do see from New Zealand to Sydney.
Yeah. One thing you do see a lot of.
Straight to Foreshore Rocks or straight to Molyneux Rocks. Yeah, carry on, sorry.
One thing you do see a lot of, which is, it's not funny, it's sad. You do see a lot of rubbish out there, which...
Oh, right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to see it, but, like, you'll see little bits of plastic floating. Sometimes you'll see timber. Like, you'll just see weird stuff like that, and it's got no business being in the ocean.
Yeah, it must be just all the weird currents. They're just sort of... Like, you know how in a river system you've always got like an eddy or a back eddy or some sort of area where the current goes contra to the flow, and obviously that's going to happen in the ocean, and everything just seems to sort of hit that dead spot and accumulate there. That must be the reason.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, with your upwellings and downwellings, you get the same thing, areas of current that are just swirling. It's almost like a huge whirlpool that's moving slowly. So yeah, I guess they just must get stuck there.
Yeah, funny. That I just remembered something during the pandemic. I think 1 or 2 of the tankers fell off the back of one of the cargo ships that were going to, I think, New South Wales, and people were telling me they were picking up packs of noodles and what was it, face masks and all sorts of stuff out in the ocean.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, there'd be that much weird stuff out there, but I mean, when you're trolling big lures, like back to your question before, there's not a whole lot that will actually pick them up. Like that's
Yep.
one good thing. Like if you were to drop a live little lollipop size yakka in the harbour, you're probably wanting a king or a Jew, but there's so much stuff that can pick it up as bycatch. When you're out there, there's not that much bycatch you're going to get. Like I was saying before, like I wanted black marlin, I got striped marlin. It's really not the end of the world. You're not going to complain about it.
Yep.
And I mean, trolling for tuna, we've picked up a few stripies here and there, but more often than not, you're either hooking a yellowfin or a bluefin.
Let's move on and talk about charts and how to read charts, because you did mention that it was something that most definitely beginners would struggle with, and it's something that you had to come to grips with as well.
Yeah, so one thing I knew just from, watching videos on YouTube and talking to a few people was temp breaks. That's not too hard to kind of wrap your head around, but one thing no one really told me about was currents. So like what we were saying literally just then about the eddies in the rivers, you've got those sorts of currents offshore as well. You want to look for your slower moving sort of stuff. You don't want to be trying to fish a current that's moving at 8, 9, 10 kilometers because the fish just can't sit there. So like, let's say hypothetically I was to go fishing tomorrow, I'd jump on the computer. The first thing I would be looking for would be your upwellings and downwellings. You don't want an area that's got too high of an upwelling because you've got faster moving water there, and same with a downwelling.
Yep.
So be looking for nice lines, anywhere between like a 0 and a 4 sort of a thing, preferably a 0 if you've got one near you. And then check your current speed. 9 times out of 10 around there, it will be moving slowly. So that's another tick box. That's kind of your second priority. Then you've got your temp breaks. Now, if you can line all 3 of those things up in a certain spot, you're probably in for a good day's fishing.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So would you say this is like the most critical factor? Understanding how to read a chart properly would pretty much dictate a lot of your chances for success.
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, the ocean, obviously everyone knows the ocean's big, but you're trying to find something tiny in a expanse of water so big, and it's not like when you're reef fishing where the fish are going to be there somewhere on the reef and you've just got to use your sounder to find them. Like, it doesn't work like that when you're in anywhere from 300 meters to 4,000 meters of water.
Yep.
Like, you've got to be in the right area, and that's one thing where the charts are really, really important. And there's a few different charts. Like, I use an app called Rip Charts. That's a paid for one. It's a bit pricey. I'm pretty sure there's a free version that Bomb do, which is similar. I think it's just it doesn't update as regularly.
Yep.
But yeah, reading your charts is, that's probably one of the biggest ones. But then as well, once you're out there, you got to know what to look for. Like, if you get to the spot that you marked and that water's dirty and green, you need to keep moving and look for some nicer water.
Let's just briefly talk about seasons for fish. Like what, tuna season, marlin season, so on and so forth.
So your bluefin run off New South Wales doesn't last all that long. Generally, June, July, maybe into August if we're really lucky. But it's normally that late June to end of July tops that you'll get them. But again, that all depends on the water temperature, depends what the East Australian current's doing, depends what the bait's doing. But that's just generally speaking. Yellowfin come in thicker through winter. You do still pick them up through the warmer season, so into autumn and spring a little bit, but they're not in as thick. Like, I wouldn't go out actively targeting tuna in January. You might pick one up, maybe, but they're probably not going to be around. And then our marlin run, at least for Sydney, would be it's start of January till the blacks will hang around till end of March, maybe into April, and then you'll get your blues into May, possibly start of June, depending how warm the water is. And then your stripies will be around, not thick, but they'll be around all year. Your stripies can tolerate quite a colder water than the other species can.
I know. Every year there always seems to be an influx of reports, and everyone's out in that small window at around June, July, and then it's all over.
Yeah, well, that's why we were kind of trying to make the most of it at the moment. My boat I got lucky. My new boat that I'm in at the moment, that was due in, I think it was mid-July, so it was only really due not that long ago. I ended up getting it early at the start of June, so it was right in time for tuna season. So we got lucky. We've been out there. We've blooded the boat about 10 times over.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that style of fishing. You got to make the most of it while it's there. I mean, it's like the guys targeting kings in the harbour. I think they come in, when do they come in? Spring?
Well, the kings are pretty much all year round, but the influx of activity usually is late spring and summer is when you start seeing it on the regular. Depends on the year.
Yeah, but similar sort of principles. Like, you kind of got to take the fish while they're there.
All right. Now, game fishing has its unique, aspect to it, which is the importance of having like a team. So you're on a boat. There's obviously more than one people, although I have heard of people going out solo and being very proud of themselves of, hooking the fish, finding the fish, landing the fish, and, things could obviously go wrong. What are some things that you'd like to mention about everyone's role? And, how many people should there be in a team?
Oh, look, man, the guys that do that, hats off to them. That is a massive achievement, and I can understand why they are so proud of themselves. Going out, I mean, it all depends on the experience of every guy. Like, if you've got two guys that are super experienced, they're well-drilled, they fish together a lot, they could do it, no worries. We normally fish minimum 3, so we'll have... And everyone's role will be determined before we hook up. So, like, you'll have whoever's going to be steering the boat, the skipper. You'll have whoever's going to clear the deck, take care of the gaff, get the gimbal on the angler, and just all your general sort of deck duties. And then you've got the angler. But as soon as you hook up, it's chaos every time. Like, even if you have one hookup and you've got a 5-rod spread, you need to get those other 4 rods in as quickly as you can. And another thing too, a lot of people don't know, when you hook up, you've got to keep the boat moving, because until there's someone actually on the end of that fish fighting that fish, you need to keep tension on the fish. So you don't slow down until all the other rods are in the boat. And that also stops any tangles as well. Because if you just stop the boat dead and you've got your lures floating out the back, there's nothing to stop them crossing each other. You need to keep that forward momentum.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So after you've all, you get a hook up, anglers fighting you get the lines in, anglers fighting the fish, such and such, someone's on the gaff, fish is about to be landed. So what's that process of landing a fish? Because, things like Marlin, it's not the safest fish to land. What are some things people need to do, and how can they be mindful of avoiding potential disaster out, 80 kilometers offshore, for example?
Yeah. Look, tuna are probably easier to bring onto a boat than marlin. Depending on the size of it, you get your first gaff in, then you get your secondary gaff in. If you can lift it over the side of the boat, lift it over. If not, if you've got a transom door, bring it in through there. Tuna, you want to bleed them, brain spike them, gut them, gill them, put them on ice straight away. I mean, if you're going to take home such a beautiful fish, you want to make the most of the meat. You don't want to let it spoil. You want to make sure you take care of it properly. So get all the blood out of it. And the reason for that is tuna heat up a lot while they're fighting. And what can happen, that blood actually heats and that can spoil the meat. So you want to bleed them straight away, kill them as quickly and as humanely as you can. Get the guts out, get the gills out. If you've got an ice bag, put them in the ice bag, spray a little bit of salt water in there, make a nice slurry, and that will keep your meat fresh until you're back at the ramp. Marlin, look, I don't keep marlin. I haven't
Yeah.
had one come to the boat dead. I mean, if it came to the boat and it was dead, then yeah, of course I would. I'm not going to just drop it back in the ocean and let it go to waste. I've actually just gone and bought myself a tag pole. I want to start doing some tagging and releasing this summer. But with Marlin, if you've live baited them, it's not too bad. So you get them up next to the boat, someone grabs them by the bill. If you can get the little circle hook at their mouth, get it out. If you can't quite reach in there while you're swimming them along, it's not the end of the world. You just snap the leader off. And those hooks, they're all, what's the word? I think biodegradable. So the salt water will eventually just rust the hook out and it'll fall out of the fish's mouth anyway. If you try to bring them on the boat for a photo, make sure you've got a couple of guys there and you're holding that bill and the fish isn't thrashing around too much, because that's when things get dangerous.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Rhys, Fagundez, thank you very much for talking about offshore tactics regarding tuna and marlin. This was a very eye-opening podcast. I actually learned heaps, and I found this extremely interesting. And I can't believe it's over. But is there anyone you'd like to thank that's contributed to your fishing and just you in general?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the podcast. Appreciate it. Always good to have a chat about fishing. And then just the guys that I'm out with. Ryan, who's like my first mate kind of thing. He's with me every single time I'm out. A couple of the boys from up at Otto's Tackle World in Drummoyne. They've always pointed us all in the right direction. They give great advice. So if anyone's in for shopping for some game fishing stuff, I'd definitely stop in there. The boys will point you in the right direction. I guess that's more or less it, man.
Yeah, awesome. How can people get in touch with you? Do you have any social media, any accounts that people could follow?
Yeah, so we're on Instagram, TikTok, and just started up on YouTube, and it's all just Bloodsportfishing.
Yeah, so any space, you just type in Bloodsportfishing and they'll find you.
Yeah, just one word, Bloodsportfishing.
Awesome, Rhys. Awesome. All right, ladies and gents, that's Rhys Fagundez talking about offshore tactics for tuna and marlin. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Podcast for the Shroom Live. I'm Shroom, and this is it for me tonight. So this is the Shroom signing out. Hope you enjoyed this one.